English football has long since been scrutinized for its perceived lack of diversity in the managerial dugouts. Nowadays, we only have one black manager, Patrick Vieira, who takes charge of Crystal Palace. But is it time for that barrier to be completely broken down once and for all? Today, we are discussing why there aren't more black managers in the English Premier League, as well as the English Football League. Stay tuned. First up, let's have a quick history lesson. You might be shocked to learn that since the Premier League's inception back in the early 1990s, there have only been 9 black managers in the league. Ruud Gullit became the first black manager in the Premier League when he took charge of Chelsea and later Newcastle United in the mid to late 90s, when it looked as though the Dutchman had ushered in a new era. But it didn't quite pan out that way. The appointment of up-and-coming black managers was few and far between, and with the exception of Chris Hughton at Brighton and Newcastle, it's safe to say black managers, when given the chance, have flattered to deceive. Paul Ince is possibly the highest-profile black manager to be given an opportunity in the top flight, but it's safe to say his time in charge at Blackburn wasn't the success-filled party he might have had in mind. He has recently taken over at Reading, however, saving them from relegation to League One last season. Others, including France legend Jean Tigana, have tried and failed, and Darren Moore will begin next season in League One after leaving Doncaster, who were in a good position at the time, to join Championship strugglers Sheffield Wednesday. Solid ex-pros such as Hayden Mullins and Terry Connor have also both been given caretaker positions at big clubs, but didn't do enough to get the full-time gig. So why aren't more black managers given a chance? It doesn't take a genius to figure out the disparity between black players on the pitch and ex-players in the dugout. Current stars like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Bukayo Saka, and Tariq Lamptey are all currently tearing the Premier League up, but they might think twice about going into management when their playing days are done. This is because the opportunities given to black players in the professional game doesn't seem to translate into the coaching side of things. England took 10 black players to the Euros last summer, but if you were to guess which players from that squad would go on to manage, you would probably only be looking at a handful of white players. And this is not a new thing. The issue has been discussed at length for decades, but ultimately we're still at the same juncture we were 20 years ago. Black representation in the Premier League in 2021 amounted to 43%. Why then were there no black managers in the dugout until Vieira's arrival? Across the whole of the English game, there is around 4% of managerial positions currently being held by black managers, which has led to suggestions by some critics that the game is institutionally racist. The English game has only ever had 28 black managers, which borders on criminal when you look at the amount of black talent, possibly suggesting that there might actually be something in the racism claims. Let's look at one particular root cause then. As you probably have guessed, the English game is largely dominated by old white men in suits, club owners in other words. Now, of course, we're not suggesting for a second that every club owner and board is racist, but hiring processes throughout English football can, a lot of the time, be based on nepotism and informal networks, which according to Delroy Corinaldi, co-founder of Black Footballers Partnership, overlooks black professionals as they generally aren't a part of these networks. He said, the decision makers in the game and ecosystem are largely from a similar group, unlike on the pitch. And the problem is even worse at boardroom level. Shockingly, just 1.6% of those in executive positions within the English game are black, with the only 2 examples of black owners or co-owners coming at Salford City and Burton Albion, 2 relatively low-profile sides. And some sources have suggested that the lack of black owners has, of course, contributed to a lack of black managers. If we boil it down to the absolute base level and use a super basic example, you could walk into a club canteen across any club in England and see players who all look like each other sitting in groups. Black youngsters from inner-city London, for example, might all sit together, and older white pros might also share the same table. These friendships will carry on after retirement, and when one white player might be given a chance to manage, who do you think he's going to bring in on his coaching staff? Yep, you guessed it. We're discussing institutional racism next. Stay with us. Back in 2004, Ron Atkinson ensured that he would never get a managerial opportunity again with a horrendous assessment of legendary French World Cup winner Marcel Desailly. His comments don't bear repeating, and he immediately offered his resignation after using the N-word. And this attitude is rife throughout a game which is still dominated by an older white majority who grew up during a time when comments and views such as this were perfectly fine to air. And Atkinson isn't the only culprit. Back in the early 1990s, Crystal Palace chairman Ron Nodes highlighted his ignorance by giving an opinion which started with the line, "The problem with black players." Of course, as an old white man, he was in no position to put forth his opinion on the perceived problem with black players, claiming that they didn't have what it took when it got to midwinter. Quite unbelievable. But these attitudes aren't completely resigned to the past. Even still, Tony Henry, who serves as director of recruitment at West Ham, complained about the attitude of black Africans, saying they wouldn't sign them anymore because they cause mayhem. These attitudes are known to go right to the top, too. In 2020, FA head Greg Clark made racist comments in Parliament, of all places. These examples just serve to highlight the uphill battle faced by black players if they are thinking about going into coaching or management once their playing days are over. What do you make of all this? So what can we do to combat these attitudes? Well, thankfully, the problem is beginning to get marginally better as attitudes gradually change. Around half of the teams in the English leagues have adopted targets from the Football Leadership Diversity Code, which aims to ensure more diverse staffing. But as of now, these measures are still voluntary. The English Football League game introduced their equivalent of the Rooney Rule back in 2019 to try to ensure that minority talent was at least being interviewed for positions, but the Premier League have quietly refused to introduce it themselves. Those in key positions within the Black Footballers Partnership have argued that there needs to be more targeted learning opportunities for black professionals whilst they're still playing, so that they understand what is available to them once they retire. They have also suggested implementing mandatory hiring quotas in the hopes that once the current generation of black superstars finish, they will be given a much fairer chance than was afforded black trailblazers of yesteryear. And all of this is certainly possible. We only have to look at the example set by the NBA in America. The sport is dominated by black players, almost 75%, and this close season just gone, 7 of the 8 management positions were filled by black coaches. Management in basketball is made of 50% black coaches and 53% black assistants, without the quality of the sport being affected one bit, which just goes to show the perceptions of black coaches in England is completely wrong. And finally, some Patrick Vieira news. Vieira took his Crystal Palace side to Goodison Park a few weeks back, with the Eagles blowing a 2-0 halftime lead, which resulted in Everton staying in the division for another season. At the end of the game, the Everton fans invaded the pitch in celebration of securing at least another year of top-flight football. However, Palace boss Vieira was goaded by an Everton fan as he made his way across the Goodison pitch to the dressing room, despite his side finishing way ahead of Everton. The fan said something to Vieira and got in his face, prompting the Palace manager to lash out and kick the fan. Some thought Vieira would face disciplinary measures from the Premier League or even worse, police action, but it has since been revealed he won't face any repercussions, and rightly so. He was left to fend for himself without any protection from Everton's stewards and had to walk through a mob of fans who should not have been on the pitch in the first place. He had every right to do what he did to defend himself. Bravo, Patrick. As always, thanks for tuning in today, and remember to stop by again next time for some more fun reveals. And why not do us a favor by liking and sharing today's video, as well as subscribing to our channel for more bits and pieces in the future.